So, welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight, and as you can see, Gary Wayne is back. The waiting is over, and our topic of today will be from Templarism to Freemasonry. If there is a connection and how it all happened, and I'm really looking forward to the subject. Gary, just a few words before we start. To a certain degree, we have it every year. But this year it was really, really bizarre. The hype around the yeah, false dates for rapture. And after the third date flopped, I stopped following that story. But I thought this is really so over the top.
Yeah,
People quitting their jobs, selling their houses,
yeah,
their cars. One woman gave her children to the Child Protective Services, and on it goes. So I know you always say there are certain signs that
yeah,
need to happen
yeah.
before. So
So
could you?
yeah, yeah, this is really sad. This is really the opposite of what we're supposed to be doing as Christians.
Hmm.
And so what they do is they reinterpret the Bible through the wisdom of the world and individual biases. And in this case, they allow for all of this to happen because they tell people that the rapture will happen before the last 7 years, or what they call a pre-tribulation rapture. But they can't produce a single verse that says that.
Mhm.
But yet they twist all the passages to get people to believe that. So now they have a pretty wide lens as to when rapture can happen, right? Because we don't know how close we are to the last 7 years, so they can start running through all sorts of models and false prophesying a date through their personal biases or interpretations and ignore everything that Scripture says. So and the other way they get around it is that they say, and this is really weird, is they say, even though not even the Son knows when Jesus' second coming exactly is in terms of the hour, they rightly divide through the Holy Spirit and do all of these things to make you a little bit intimidated by them. So I was out front starting in about June, and in as much social media and Facebook groups and other groups to say, hey, don't fall for this. This is not true. You think they're making sense, but you have to verify it, and it does not stand up to what they're saying. So, and they were saying, it was going to happen in the Feast of the Trumpets, and then the Day of Atonement, and then even before that is the different variations of the same false prophecy, as it turns out to be, um, when the rapture was coming. So they by doing that single thing of placing the rapture where they would like to have it so we don't have to go through the pain of what might happen in the end time, they play to people's biases and they buy into it. Anything that says, oh, that could make sense, that could make sense. And we've seen what, 2,000 years of false predictions? And yet people fall for it all the time. And your point, what you raised, which is what I try and get across to people, is we can't get ahead of prophetic chronology. There are certain signs, there are things that have to be in place before this happens. Even if you think it happens sometime just before the last 7 years, those signs are not in place yet. So some of the major signs are we do not have a universal religion that is going to happen in the next couple of years. It's going to take more time. We don't have a world government and a seven king end time empire that's in relationship to understanding it as an empire of Rome, but on a larger scale, as on a global scale, or Babylon or Persia or Greece. We don't have anything like those two major things yet. Are we seeing possible sorrows or birth pangs? Yes. But are they increasing together and increasingly happening more often and more powerful, perhaps, but not working together, but not to the degree that show up in the signs. So those birth pangs are of the sorrows are earthquakes. Yes, we're seeing larger earthquakes, but not to the level that's described in the last 7 years, right? And therefore leading up, say 5 years before, there'd be a increase of magnitude that is significance in quantity. Wars and rumors of wars. Yes, we see some geopolitical things happening and more of this, but not the things that would reshape the world through the catastrophes of war, famine, which is another one, and pestilence, and all working together along with the earthquakes to allow such political and religious shift to come along. And to have this universal religion come along, you have to have the false prophets that come along first that can provide prophecies to scare people into it, to become the new Babel, the new Babylon, so that we don't become destroyed from the face of the earth. And so we don't see any sign of these false prophets, and they're wanting to bring about this universal religion. And we certainly don't see yet a concerted effort to de-deify Jesus and make him part of Confucius, Hermes, Mohammed, Buddha, all of the ones that were sent on the way according to the global religion that is going to be coming. And we haven't seen that measure up yet. And it has to get to the point where you start to see these false prophets and you see many people in Christianity starting to split. Some for this new phenomena that's going on, that's going to make their home at uh, the seven mountains, the Septimonium in Rome, on Palatine Hill, likely, where the Sibylline prophecies were located, and that you're going to see something that is it's got to be, I think, twofold. A, you need such a war amongst the Arab people to settle Sunni and Shia, and get that sort of kind of folded in by hook or crook or force or whatever, and also to bring them into a polytheist religion. And then you need, if some people would say, well, they don't have to go further with the Judaism, but again, you have to have the Kabbalist movement and Sabaism and Essenism and all the various forms and Mandaeans of Jewish mysticism in control and willing to participate in this universal religion. So, and if you're going to have this universal religion with these false prophets, they're going to have to play to all the branch religions at the same time. So you're going to see, if you're going to see a Queen of Heaven, for example, you're going to see that manifest not only as a Mary type of apparition as what we see in the Catholic Church, but you're going to have to see that as Hathor. You're going to have to see that as another one that's the consort of Osiris, so I don't say the name and have anything taken down. And it's going to be Lilith. It's going to be Ashtart, Ashtaroth, Anat. I mean, just go on, and all of these female goddesses around the world that plays to those individual polytheist religions, it's going to have to unite them under that woman, that polytheist religion of the end time. So much is yet to happen, but things can happen quickly with great catastrophes, but we don't have those great catastrophes yet. And we don't see this geopolitical arrangement of 10 kings and 10 empires working together as one government yet.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When the first date flopped, shortly after that,
Yep.
the it was a South African pastor, and he
Yeah.
said, "Yeah, well, we need to look at the Julian calendar in instead
Oh,
of
geez.
Gregorian."
Although why didn't they get that right the first time if that was the case?
Yeah.
But
And then I watched a video where a lady explained, no, no, we are still on track. Jesus didn't know that we are using the Gregorian calendar.
Oh,
And I was sitting in front of my computer and I thought, do you even hear yourself?
isn't that crazy?
The Son of God that you believe in didn't know what we use as a calendar. Do you hear that nonsense?
Yeah, like they don't care what we use as our calendar. They have their own ordained time, and on whatever time thing that they work that they sit above, it'll happen on in the ordained time, not when we want to falsely try and recreate it.
Yeah.
So, but that's a virus that's within Christianity that continues to discredit Christianity so that nobody's going to listen when we get closer to that. I mean, and we just can't seem to get people to get out of the brainwashing. And they come with all of these passages that they can justify it, but you go back and say, well, it doesn't say that. Well, it's inferred. Well, what does that mean? Show me your typology. If you're inserting something that's not there to say what it doesn't say, tell me how you got there. Well, no, I got that from the Holy Spirit. So well, the Holy Spirit wouldn't contradict Jesus. So maybe you should test the spirits, but they don't want to hear it. And they're not. And the amazing thing is they're not dissuaded. They're doubling down again.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so thank you very much for clarifying that again.
Again, yes. And I take a lot of heat on this because I get out in front and I get called all sorts of horrible things for several months. And then nobody comes back and said, okay, you're right. Or say, you know what, maybe I should look at things a little bit closer. They don't. It's just like, no, we're moving on. Well, it could happen still before the end of the year. Well, it could happen. It's like, stop it. Just stop.
Yeah, exactly. And don't make a mockery of your faith. I mean,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah,
And
yeah.
even when that happens, it will not be announced on TikTok. You can rest assured.
Yes. TikTok will not be our go-to to understand what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so now history suggests that the Knights Templar order was founded because they had to protect the pilgrims that were on their way to the Holy Land, to Jerusalem. But when you listen to Templars themselves, when they talk among each other, then you hear them say, yeah, well, that was a cover. That, that was
Yeah.
a cover for something else because yeah, the Crusaders, they were fighting for the Holy Land and on and on. But the Templars were more concerned with, yeah, getting artifacts
Yeah.
and collecting evidence and proof that there was a pre-Diluvian society and to capture the knowledge, what is left, and then bring it all in. So, what is your take on that?
Yeah, and that's a pretty good summary. So there was already a night order that was created in 1040 to 1045 that had a papal bull and was doing that. Maybe not in the ways that the Templars grew to very quickly after they were assembled, but the Templars weren't formed until 1090 and then officially seen in 1099. So this job was already being performed by the Knights of St. John, Knights of Malta, Knights of Rhodes. They have several different names with the evolution, but it's that same organization, but they were already doing that. So, yeah, it's a rouge that you have them saying we're there to protect pilgrims. And they went there for a specific sort of agenda. And they were looking for not just treasure. Yes, they were looking for treasure, but they were looking for possibly the Ark of the Covenant, which comes out quite regularly, whether or not they found that or not. Maybe they did, maybe they did not, or found
They
one
say
like
they
that.
found 12.
Yeah. So whatever they found, they took and they took back, and they were looking for um, other important artifacts that would support some of their history. So, records and genealogies in specific that they were after. And they were in part of their organizational sort of purpose, their mission, they were the keepers of the message. And the keepers of the message was the bloodlines that they wanted to connect back into um, Jesus, into David, and into King Saul for their pedigree and preparation to bring about the end time. They were thinking about it way back then as well, and that they wanted proof to assert what they believe. So they were looking for that. So everything that they found, including, it seems, lost building technology, was taken back because with the Templars, the Gothic building style was introduced, which replaced the old Gothic and the Romanesque before that, and that the Templars took control over the Mason guilds to introduce those uh, new architecture that the church readily bought into because of how magnificent they were. But then they put every polytheist symbol under the sun into those churches, which is an absolute crazy thing. And all of those cathedrals were built on locations that were previous very important holy sites of polytheism.
Hmm.
And so, yes, they were after a lot of things, and it wasn't to protect the pilgrims. That they would do as part of, the cover story, but they also grew to be the greatest army ever seen, a military force ever seen, the greatest banking system that ever was. And they were a secret society, not formed from, poor, uneducated monks. They were all, sons of kings. And originally, there's 9 of them that sign on to this, and that they will be 2 other ones who will become important that are part of their records, their own records. So 9 is what we're told, and they're not poor monks. And the 2 monks that are in there are Cistercian monks, which are also directly related to several of the other people within the Knights Templars, like within one generation, within one sibling. So these are very much royales that are in this organization, including the two monks. And then you're going to have the folk of Anjou and um, Henri de Saint Clair as the 2 other ones who are not written as part of the original 9, but the folk of Anjou will become the third leader of Jerusalem and first one crowned truly the king of Jerusalem in 1118 when they separate the senior order from the junior order. So, no, they did not go there to be protecting pilgrims. They were there to collect and organize and get control of the holy city and to create heaven on earth, is the kingdom on earth. And so their kings were called the kings of heaven,
Hmm.
right? And the kings of Jerusalem. So, and they still have those titles around to this day with King Philippe of Spain, of Bourbon bloodline, who holds the King of Jerusalem title. Von Habsburgs also have a claim to it, but it was passed on. So you have more dysfunction and rivalry going on with that. And the Savoy, which is also Anjou, out of the Italian bloodline of kings, and they also have a claim. And in book too. I go through their claims as well so that people can sort out how that title was passed down.
Mm. I find that interesting that you mentioned he was crowned king in Jerusalem. Isn't
Yeah.
that the Antichrist will be crowned as well?
Yes, yes, King of Jerusalem. Absolutely, he's going to take that title, and will be crowned in the temple in Jerusalem and raised up to be higher than, to the Prince of the Host, the King of the Host, which is obviously, you know, into the titles of Jesus and to the God Most High. So, and he's going to claim himself to be God in the temple. So, and they want that pedigree as well. So that pedigree includes a falsified, from a Christian perspective, bloodlines back to Mary Magdalene and Jesus, saying that Jesus didn't die on the cross, and through Josephus, through Josephus, that third offspring or third son, it was passed on and into Glastonbury and into the Pendragon, Druidic, Camelot dynasties, intermarried into those dynasties, and then with Urigen of the Celtic dynasty marrying Amenemhat of the Merovingian dynasty, and then connecting back into the some of the original Knights Templars with Hugh de Payens, um, and Godfrey de Bouillon and the Folk of Anjou, the one of the two that's not listed in the nine. They were direct descendants back to Dagobert. So you start to see the importance of this genealogy that they're looking for additional evidence to. So they wanted to have in that pedigree genealogies that would be held in the temple that would connect them to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and to raise Mary Magdalene up with a genealogy that they say takes her back to Benjamite and high priestess, which is a polytheist thing because women weren't high priests in the time of Israel or Judah. And they also want that pedigree that goes back through to David, and they have that through a couple lanes as well, and also to the Benjamite of bloodlines of King Saul, through Mary Magdalene, and then through the Sicambian Franks that will also intermarry with the Merovingians as well. Because the importance of that is all the different inheritance and authority to rule on earth, including from King Saul, who was a Benjamite, and the first king was a Benjamite. And the importance of that is that in the time of the Exodus and times of the conquest wars, Joshua awarded Jerusalem to the Benjamites. So now that's how they claim through a divine inheritance through the bloodlines the King of Jerusalem title.
Hmm. Yeah. So they say that they believe in this pre-Diluvian society,
Yep.
and it was important to them to hunt down these pockets of knowledge to get Europe out of the Dark Ages.
Yes.
But I have a feeling there is another reason why they are so interested in the pre-Diluvian time. And do you have any
So
idea?
yeah, so they actually take Freemasonry, and by virtue, the Templars will take their beginnings back to before the flood, to the creation of the seven sacred sciences by Enoch, son of Cain, versus Enoch, son of Jared of the Seth line, and that this knowledge merges with the antediluvian technology provided by the gods, or from a biblical perspective, fallen angels. And in the book of Enoch, Azazel becomes a very important figure, teaching all the arts of war, but most of the knowledge and the technology that was provided. So, in their tradition, they have this knowledge crossing the flood in two different ways, one through Nimrod, and then the other one descending down through uh, David and Solomon. Um, and that knowledge came into possession by Solomon and then buried underneath the flood. So they're looking for that technology that is greater than what we have today.
Mhm.
So we might look at maybe that Gothic architecture as being part of that, but also, as you say, to create the Renaissance. And they take credit for that, whether it's true or not, they take credit for it. So it would play into that and the dawning again of the age of the sciences, as we know, as the seven liberal arts today, which is the seven sacred sciences from the beginning that they created mysticism, the polytheist root religion, Zoroastrianism, as we would understand that, um, as an antediluvian or pre-flood religion, and then popping up again after the flood. And even with that, you get a Trismegistus, which is part of the Gnostic history of three different Hermes that is protecting and transferring this knowledge from the flood, from before the flood to after the flood, and then in continue development. So you have Garamond, who is the first one who is going to receive this religion, and he's a giant in the um, Sanskrit version. And that this is the root of Zoroastrian as it shows up after the flood. And they have three Zoroasters, the Garamond, um, and you also have a Zoroaster that is shortly after the flood. Sometimes they say that is Ham, and from the Gnostic perspective of it, where you would have Ham, Zarathustra. That's how they get that. And also you have a third one that is about 600 BC and sort of restarts the religion. And this is also the religion of Persia as well. So you have a Sanskrit and an Avestan version of that sort of religion. So yeah, they want everything they can get on that information if it's there and the technology that's going to come back. And they do take credit for restarting the age of science. And again, it's to take control of not only developing the knowledge, the technology, but also to do that away from the oversight of the Roman Church. And so that's going to be a battle that's going to, rule for a long time. And the religion of the sciences in the time of the Templars are the Cathars and the Albigensians, which the Roman Church is going to go to war with to try and wipe out, like they did a lot of the other polytheist religions, like the Manichaeans, for example.
Yeah. The Templars say that the Albigensians went against the Catholic Church and the monarchy, what they believed.
Yes.
And but then again, you have parts of the monarchy also participating
Yeah.
in the same belief structure. So something doesn't add up here.
Well, that's because, polytheism never goes away, right? In
Mhm.
within the reign of the Roman Church. And even though they do waves of inquisitions and trying to subvert it, you're going to have Gnostic organizations, and I call them Gnostic because you've got various groups that are going to, like the Manichaeans, the Mithra religion, which is part of the Zoroastrian religion. It's a branch of, and Mithra is a god of Zoroastrian as well. Um, and other ones that are going to go underground, right? And a lot of these are going to be part of groups that are going to be the founders of the Knights Templars downstream. But they never go away. So they mold themselves into organizations that we know as the monastic order within the Gnostic Church, whether it's Augustines or Cistercians or Franciscans or the numerous ones that they have. And this is built on the Essene monastic order system that came from the East, which is an older version of that monasticism. And so you have, um, the Joannites and the Mandaeans and the Essenes and other ones that are all sort of molded and being pushed out of Europe. But they will always have a presence within the church because they're going to be the ones who are working. And up until the time of the Mason guilds, are doing all the church building, whether or not it's the old Romanesque style or the old Gothic. And then you get the intersection of that with the Mason guilds dominated by the Templars taking over, but they're part of the same religion. So it all sort of makes sense. And so once you start to see the rise of the Cathars and the Albigensians, they are a branch of what they call the Bogomils out of the East, where all of these other religions escape to escape the persecution and outside the Holy Roman Empire.
Mm,
And so they start to set up these branch organizations through royals who are not swearing allegiance publicly or privately to the Catholic Church, or on the surface support the Catholic Church, but are going to still support this polytheist religion because it's their religion. It's the religion of the giants. It's the religion of the royals.
mhm. Um, we also have these Brothers of the East that were founded in 1057 in Constantinople.
Yep.
And they set themselves up and were known as the Church of St. Sergius and Bacchus. Do they have
Yes.
something to do with that?
Sure, it's all part of those orders that are all being set up. And these are these night orders, and they take their organizational structure from basically three groups: the Essenes,
Mhm.
the Assassins,
Mhm.
and the Gnostics of Alexandria and the orders of Ormus. And so they're all in sort of intermixing with that. And so that's just another order of polytheists that's working to try and reshape the Middle East and the destiny of the world. Ultimately, they're all working towards bringing the Seventh Roman Empire, or the Seventh Empire as the Roman Empire as we understand that coming forward for the end time.
Mm. What you can also see, their obsession with the ancient times,
Yeah,
wherever you want to locate that,
yeah,
Predeluvian or shortly after,
both.
is yeah.
The
Is the equal armed cross that they are famous for. Because,
the double cross you're
no,
talking about?
no, I do not mean the double cross, the
Yeah,
equal armed cross. And you see that in Sumer
yeah,
already.
yeah,
Yeah, we remember these
yeah,
depictions of the Anunnaki. They had the same cross.
yeah.
Um, and you also find it in ancient Egypt.
Yes.
So,
That's like the Maltese cross is what you're referring to, that dimension where the equal arms on it.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's their favored cross that goes back to before the flood.
Exactly. And that is their belief that it goes back to Atlantis.
Yes. Yeah. Or other civilizations in Sumeria as well, because you actually get reliefs in Sumeria that show that cross. So, yeah, it goes back to that ancient time and probably is reflective of their ancient religion,
Mhm.
where they use that cross. So, when you see the red cross that comes down for the Knights Templar, this is part of that Red Cross order that goes back into ancient times. Now, it's not going to be formally the equal armed cross, but it's representing the same thing. It's just done to give you a superficial look as a Christian cross, but they understand it as their ancient cross and associated with their ancient religion and the knowledge that they had at that time. So, anytime you see that equal armed cross, understand that's more of a polytheist one than a monotheist cross.
Yeah. And I know we talked about this briefly before. There is a very interesting article on Script, and you do not have to pay for it. It's called The Red Cross of Azazel.
Yeah.
So this author makes the connection of the Red Cross to Azazel. It's
Yeah, that's very, and it's, you know, takes a little bit to get there, but I would say it's an accurate statement. And that cross of awarded in by National Socialism to their army is that same, but only it's a black cross versus a red cross, right? Um, but it's the same sort of imagery, and understand that Azazel is the one who provided, as I talked about earlier, the most amount of the knowledge and the technology, right? And so he's the one that is degraded to a goat god from a seraphim god. And that he is very, very important to the Templars and to the secret societies, including Freemasonry downstream. And this god has different names in different cultures. And so you have a god that we've quickly referred to as Mithra, and in Sanskrit, Mitra, Mitra, and it means in Sanskrit and Proto-Indo-Aryan, Indo-European, both, because it's the same, it meant a covenant. It just says Antichrist will create a covenant in the end time, and that Mitra would have an incarnation at the end of an age. And Mitra is very much like Shiva. Mitra is more Avestan in the original Zoroastrian versus the Sanskrit. Again, you have the Sanskrit, Proto-Indo-European and Aryan, and then you have the ancient Aryan and Old Persian, where that comes out of, that was in the Persian Valley. And so Mitra is this god who incarnates into people and does so at the end of an age. And so this is, in short, the name for Lord Maitreya
mm-hmm.
that the Gnostics and Eastern religions like to talk about, the new Buddha, the Christ consciousness that's coming for the end time. And Mitra connects back into the Templars because they worshipped a god named Baphomet. Well, Baphomet is French for Father Mitra. And so it's the same God as Azazel that ends up being the one that they're worshiping, because it is the same God. And Azazel will be coming out of the pit prison or wherever he is, because the polytheist thinks he's hung in Orion, but he comes back in the end time because he's the destroyer God, Abaddon, Apollyon, as we would know him, that comes out of the pit prison in Revelation 9. And so this god that is represented as Baphomet, that the Templars worshipped in secret, is the one that provides ancient knowledge to them and insights. And this is the same god that they adorn with Rosslyn Chapel and honor in this angel that's hung upside down in Scotland, built by the Sinclairs, with this rope trailing behind that's stylized S or Z, depending on how you want to transliterate the sounding of it through the languages, and that he's got this pearl of uh, wisdom associated with him as well. So this is the same God that they worship, just
Yeah,
a different vernacular name for it.
yeah. You know what I ask myself right now? How did they manage to convince the world that they were a Catholic order?
Yeah, and because they work very well subversively. And so the problem with the Royales is there's not as many of them as there is of the rest of the world, even with the top two classes. And so we outnumber them. So they've, through money and power and military, have found ways to control humanity. And that when the kings swore an oath to the God, understand two things: is that they're swearing in modern times, and certainly with the time of the King James Bible for the English monarchies, they would swear on a Bible to a God using a pope, like a pope or a minister or a priest to to do that ceremony. This is an ancient inheritance right that goes back to the giants, and that they're not swearing to the God of the Bible. They're swearing to a specific God they have a genealogical connection to in their belief system, and that they keep these genealogies. So they received their divine right to rule from the council of the gods in polytheism. And as we would understand as the council of gods in Psalms 82 that rule over the 70 nations and described in Deuteronomy 32, both before and after the flood. So they're swearing an oath to their patriarchal God, not to the God of the Bible. And you see really weird things show up in the court of these royales, like a court jester that's there to make supposedly the royales laugh and humor them, and he's some sort of idiot. Well, it's got that shaman black, not shaman black, but that shaman white face. That's part of the occult. This is a priest in the court,
Hmm.
disguised as a fool, and he's advising the king. So when you see any of the royal courts throughout history that have gestures, those are where they hid in plain sight their priest.
Hmm. Yeah. And also in, I mean, the Templars didn't stay in the Holy Land, and
No, they did not.
they spread out all over. And for instance, they had in Philae in Egypt, they had their headquarter in the Temple of Isis.
Yeah.
And so from
And
there, they say they brought this iconography of Isis nursing Horus, which is resembles, of course, the iconography of Mary nursing Jesus.
yes,
Then they had this black basalt statues that they saw there. They gave the entire Isis Horus a lift, a
yep,
facelift, so to
yep,
say. Then it became Mary and Jesus.
yep.
And they also introduced the Black Madonna.
Yes, they did as well. Yes.
Yeah,
And
so
and and
this is why I'm saying this. Is it possible that the Catholic Church itself is on board with all of this?
well, certainly elements are of it. Whether all of them are, that's a different argument. And we need to understand that the popes in, up until say the last 50 years or so, maybe a little more, but the popes were all supplied by the royales. And polytheism, you have bloodlines of popes,
Yeah,
like with the Brahmins and the Druids. And so they infiltrated the church structure of the Roman church quite early after the formation with Constantine and the merging of Mithraism and Egyptian imagery that through that Red Cross order the Templars draw on, because you have that first sign of that Red Cross order show up after Constantine takes power. So you start to see these connections that the Templars are reintroducing, let's so to speak, in terms of imagery and organizational structure. And so when we look at um, the the imagery that's coming through the Royales and through the Knights Templar, with this imagery of Mary, this is we have to look at this as the holistic global polytheist religion through those kinds of lenses. And so Mary Magdalene is raised to be like a queen of heaven. And she's the one who the Templars dedicate all of those Gothic cathedrals to that have gargoyles on them and all sorts of polytheist imagery throughout. And so you have this Queen of Heaven, which is a standard polytheist doctrine, whether it's Sophia Gnosticism, whether it's a female goddess of any of the pantheons around the world, they are called Queens of Heaven. So Lilith is a Queen of Heaven, Cybele is a Queen of
ISIS,
Heaven.
Pyramus, yeah.
Yeah, all of them have that title, and it's an inherited title. And even with setting up into Paris, where is their central location, they would adjudicate under a great elm tree, which is the greatest, most sacred tree within Gnosticism because it represents the family tree, and it's the tree of one of the trees of the groves. There's oaks as well and ash, but they're kind of similar trees. But when you look at the genealogical tree, it's based on the elm tree. And the genealogy that takes their family tree back to specific Rephaim and Nephilim patriarchs into a specific celestial mafia godfather or a fallen angel or a god. And so that's very important to them. And that they're going to receive in the papal bulls the ability to set up their own church. It's kind of like a rice church, right? It's their own church, and they do not have any oversight from any other bishops except for the Pope. But now, if you've put in your own Pope as installed from that polytheist religion, as backed by the royals who control all the money and the armies, they're going to be able to operate in secrecy with a polytheist religion that they're going to be worshiping in the Knights Templars. It's just all it's a massive organization that is controlling things, but giving us a superficial look on the outside that it's part of the Christian hegemony. Well, it's not. It's a polytheist hegemony, and they just use the Christian veneer as a disguise or as a covering. And their organizations are organized in the same way. So if you have the Templars, you have the Grand Masters and the Adepts who know the secrets. But those below the Adept level of Grand Master don't know the true secrets. They're just there for window dressing, for cover. And Freemasonry has that same organization. You don't know anything that's true until you become 33rd degree or third degree in the old York Rite as the first level of adept. That's how they operate.
Yeah. That is so true. A lot of these secret societies, um, I'm very convinced that on the lower levels, what we call the Blue Lodge or Porch
Yep.
Masonry, people really think it's yeah,
Yep.
about spaghetti dinners and
Yep.
charity.
Yeah. And they do some good causes, but it's designed to let at the adept level and higher, first level adept and higher, to do things behind the cover of that. So it's strategy and tactics that have proven to work very well over the millennia,
Yeah.
and that only today are we scratching the surface of how big this organization is worldwide. But understand they also all have rivals because there can only be one king of the world, one royal family. So that's a part of what slows them down in trying to do things the way they want to do them. So yeah, so and you can see even with the structure of the Templars, as with assassins and Alexandrian Gnostics and um, the Essenes and the Kabbalist movement, this is all part of the religious dynamite behind the organizational structure that was created to create the new Babylon for the end time, but also delivered all of this so-called technology, knowledge, and treasures to particularly at the beginning the French uh, royales, but then later moved to Scotland under the Sinclairs, and then as it goes downstream to Oak Island as one of the stopping places, and then on to the First Nation reserves, where federal governments have no oversight on the First Nation reserve. So they made treaties with many of those nations. That's according to what I was told. So if people are watching the Oak Island series on the History Channel, I don't know whether they do in Europe or not. They're not going to find a whole bunch, but it's an intriguing sort of investigative series that's been going on for years. So yeah, again, we need to sort of look at what this organization looks like, and all the night orders, whether or not it's the Knights of St. John or the Teutonic Knights or Calatrava or Knights of Christ after the Templars or the Montesa order, they're all based on the same organizational structure as the Templars.
Yeah. So I wrote something down that I will read now so that I do not forget something or mix it up. And that has to do with John the Baptist, who
Yeah,
is also very, very important to the Knights Templar.
yeah,
So the Joannites, that's also an order,
yep.
allegedly a tradition that started with John the Baptist in a line of succession going all the way to Theoclyde in Constantinople, who then entrusted Eudepanes with the same mission. They
Yeah,
believe this tradition goes back to the god Oannes, the fish
yeah,
god,
yeah,
the fish god who came from the sea and baptized priest kings. So and now we have another connection to Oannes, because uh, the feast of Oannes was June 24th, and that became later on John the Baptist Day.
yeah,
And this fish god,
yes,
interestingly enough, Oannes, if you Google it and you click images, he's also wearing this hat that the Pope wears,
yes, yeah,
like a fish.
yeah.
So any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, and so what Gnosticism does, and I use that as a generic term because they want to create this united global Gnosticism. They all believe it's the same religion that goes back to the root religion, the mother religion, that we have all these different branches that have developed. And so what they're looking at with the Bible is they're always trying to draft in all of the patriarchs. They do that throughout their history to make them polytheist, that monotheism went rogue from the true religion, um, is how they sort of get there. And so um, John the Baptist is drafted as an Essene in that belief system.
Yeah.
Jesus is drafted as an Essene. Mary Magdalene is an Essene. And so the scene becomes that very, very important religion. But as we've already referenced, they create the monastic order that invades the Roman Church. They are part of the organizational structure of the Freemasonic Society that comes downstream from the Templars. And they are distinctly Egyptian polytheism, which, as you make that connection with the Alexandrian Gnostics and the Order of Ormus, which is part of the founding of the Knights Templar, which gives you now that reintroduction of all of that Egyptian sort of imagery that we see that had combined with Mithra and Christianity by Constantine. All of a sudden, things start to make sense that there's two religions that are happening together down through our Western history. And depending on which side you're on, who are the good guys and which are the bad guys, because they're both fighting for supremacy.
Hmm.
So,
But
yes, um, when we look at that connection to John the Baptist, he would have a bloodline because that's what they believe in. Just as they believe Jesus has this bloodline as a prophet, and a teacher, and the teacher of righteousness that they say the Essenes were talking about um, was saying it was Jesus and one of the teachers of righteousness, and that he would have a bloodline, and that this priest king is just to finish off on because you said a whole bunch of really important imagery there. So the priest king that goes right back to ancient times from before the flood. And this is the priest king that comes down with a healing sort of understanding that they would have had because they had the ability to heal themselves and others, also reflected in the Merovingian imagery, and in that case, the dark haired giants out of Sumeria. Um, and this is an image that they would lay down with beginning right back to Adam as a archetype for the priest king that is fulfilled through Cain and through the descendants of Cain before the flood from a Gnostic Western world position, and that this is the same Fisher King imagery that we see more in modern times as the same sort of imagery. And just as they say Jesus is a priest king as well, which he is in the imagery, but not as a deity status, as a prophet status, as they would accept him as. So understand this bloodline that intermixes with royales, and when it's blended into the same one holding that title is the ancient model where it split into bloodlines of priests. Let's say, let's use the Indian model where you have the Brahmin bloodline of priests, but then you'll have the Raja kings. It splits after the flood to a certain degree, even though it would have been under one, as in a Nimrod, from a biblical perspective, who was king and control of the religion, where he would be considered a priest king and is, and also the first Mason who wrote the first constitution for the Masons after the flood at Babel. That this is the imagery that has been split down, that when it comes back to full fruition will produce the dragon Messiah, as in the Antichrist, who will be king of the world and introduce his new religion after destroying Babylon. So that's the unification destiny that they want to bring about, or the new Eden or the new Atlantis.
And what would be the destroyed Babylon in that scenario?
Well, that would be the universal religion that comes before Antichrist, because Antichrist rises amongst the 10 horns in the last 7 years.
Mm.
He's the one who negotiates the covenant in Daniel 9:27 to launch the last 7 years, but he's not one of the 10 kings yet. And he's going to overthrow three and come to power. And those 10 kings will give them his power in the hour, the prophetic hour biblically, where a lot of things happen in the seventh trumpet, but specifically to get rid of Babylon because they grow jealous of Babylon and her control, because she controls the 10 kings in the end time and is a universal religion and is a city and is a geopolitical and economic organization. And between Antichrist and the 10 kings of Revelation 17, at the midpoint of the last 7 years, they destroy Babylon. And then, as Daniel 11 talks about in detail, presents a religion the fathers didn't know. So it's a new religion um, to succeed the Babylon religion.
Mm.
That
In,
includes the mark of the beast and everything else that comes along with that.
yeah, interesting. Jehovah's Witnesses believe that Babylon signifies uh, all the organized religions, except, of course, Jehovah's Witnesses, and
Yes.
that they will be destroyed. They do not make the connection to this unified one world religion.
Yeah, well, and you could make a case. I mean, not that I tend to fully agree with Jehovah Witnesses eschatology.
Mm,
Um, it's got a lot of holes in it, and they do what most religions do is they maneuver it to fit their preconceived conclusions. But To underscore what they're kind of hinting at there is that this is a worldwide religion of Babylon, but it's an umbrella religion because it's uniting all the religions of the world under one umbrella religion that they'll provide ancient wisdom and knowledge to saying this is how it happened, but they're all the same gods that we're worshiping. So they would then say, we're the only ones who won't be fooled because we're the true church.
Yeah, yeah,
But there will be other Christians that and even within the Catholic Church, if it ends up being, and I think it is, one of the ways that we get to the universal religion, not being the universal religion, but being one of the branch religions and maintaining likely a location on Vatican Hill, which is a Sibylline hill. That was a branch of the Palatine Hill of the Sibylline prophecies and the Queen of Heaven imagery, again, as we represent there. But there will be a split even in the Catholic Church of conservatives to this new religion. I use conservatives a bit loosely there, but ones at least that are trying to hold to a more traditional, literal understanding. So it won't go smoothly even through the Catholic Church. And there'll be remnants of people, of Protestants around the world, not all, but many will. So, and one would expect that not all of Islam is going to follow, and not all of Judaism is going to follow. And I would also imagine that between the white hats and the black hats, there's going to be others that are polytheists who don't like how this is shaping up, and they won't follow. So it doesn't control everybody, but it gets in that power position. But then Babylon is forced to bring about the tribulation of the saints from the Christian perspective. But as I would warn polytheists, if you don't align with this new ascetic monastic order type of religion that they're going to introduce, um, and the regulations that they bring down with it, then you will be perceived as anti-religion and part of the people that will be searched out for persecution. And it will dip right into families of people betraying each other. So this is a very powerful force that's going to come along, but has a short life because Antichrist says, no, I don't need that. I want it all for myself. And
yeah,
Babylon is wiped out in a single day. But it sets up the whole system and platform for Antichrist to come to power.
yeah. So, Gary, our first hour is gone. I found it very, very interesting and enlightening. And yeah, guys, this was the public hour, and we will see the patrons on the other side.